The town of Thornfield had always been a peaceful place, nestled away from the bustling cities and noisy roads. The townspeople knew each other well, their lives intertwined in the delicate fabric of daily routines. But one fateful evening, the peace was shattered by a scream that echoed through the empty streets. Margaret Whitmore, a young woman who had lived in Thornfield her whole life, was found dead in the local library, her body draped over an antique writing desk, a look of terror frozen on her face. The local police, unaccustomed to such horrors, were baffled by the scene. No sign of struggle. No obvious wounds. The only clue was a strange symbol etched into the back of her hand, something that had never been seen before in the small town. The case was sent to Detective Amelia Carter, a sharp-witted investigator known for her ability to untangle even the most complex mysteries. Amelia arrived in Thornfield with a cool, calculated demeanor, her piercing blue eyes scanning the town as she walked toward the crime scene. The air was thick with tension, and the townspeople watched her from behind curtained windows, whispering amongst themselves. They were all nervous, each wondering what the detective would uncover. Amelia, however, was calm. She had seen much darker things than this. As she entered the library, her trained eyes took in every detail. The room was dimly lit, and the dust on the floor was undisturbed, suggesting the murder had occurred very recently. She examined Margaret's body carefully, noting the unnatural stillness of her posture. Then, her gaze shifted to the desk. There, she found a set of old, yellowed letters that seemed to have been deliberately placed there, yet were covered with an eerie layer of dust, as if untouched for years. The detective picked up the letters, scanning them quickly. They were written in a cryptic code, but one word stood out: vengeance. Amelia's thoughts raced. Vengeance? The word felt out of place, as if someone was sending a message through the victim. The more she looked around the room, the more she felt a growing sense of unease. It was as if the room itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. But what? The first person to speak with Amelia was Thomas Whitmore, the victim's brother. He seemed shaken, but his composure remained intact. "I don't understand it," he said, pacing back and forth in the library. "Margaret was the most peaceful person I knew. She had no enemies." "Everyone has enemies," Amelia replied, her voice calm. "Even the most gentle souls have someone who resents them." Thomas stopped pacing and looked at her with wide eyes. "Are you suggesting my sister had enemies? Are you accusing her of something?" Amelia raised a hand, signaling for him to calm down. "I'm suggesting nothing. I'm simply stating that there is always more to a person than what we see on the surface. Now, tell me, did your sister have any acquaintances, anyone unusual in her life recently?" Thomas hesitated, as if choosing his words carefully. "There was a man, but I don't know much about him. Margaret never spoke about him much. His name was Gregory Blackwood, a writer. He moved into the old mansion at the edge of town about a month ago." "But why would you ask about him?" Amelia's interest piqued. "A writer, you say? That's interesting." The mansion at the edge of Thornfield was known for its eerie history. It had been abandoned for decades, and few people dared to go near it. Amelia felt the chill of the wind as she approached the large, decaying house. The trees surrounding the property were twisted and gnarled, their branches reaching out like dark fingers. Inside the mansion, the air was musty, and dust particles floated lazily in the dim light. Gregory Blackwood greeted her at the door, a man in his mid-30s with piercing green eyes and a dark expression. He was tall, dressed in a suit that looked too formal for the surroundings, and his presence seemed to fill the room with an unsettling tension. "I've been expecting you, Detective," he said, his voice low and smooth. "I presume you're here about Margaret." Amelia nodded, her eyes narrowing. "I need to ask you some questions." Blackwood led her to a dimly lit study where the walls were lined with bookshelves filled with ancient volumes. He motioned for her to sit. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," she replied. As Amelia questioned him, she sensed that Blackwood was hiding something. He was evasive, his answers too calculated, and there was an unsettling undercurrent to his words. But despite his demeanor, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that he knew more than he was letting on. Amelia left the mansion with more questions than answers. Gregory Blackwood's odd behavior weighed heavily on her mind. Why had Margaret Whitmore been involved with a man like him? And what exactly was his connection to the mysterious symbol on her hand? It was clear that there was a hidden story, one that no one in Thornfield seemed ready to tell. Back at the police station, Amelia sat in her office, examining the cryptic letters once more. She tried to decipher the code but was making little progress. That's when an idea struck her. Perhaps the key to understanding the letters wasn't in the words themselves, but in the history of Thornfield. The detective visited the local library again, this time to speak with the elderly librarian, Mrs. Selby. The old woman had been working in the library for as long as anyone could remember and was a fountain of knowledge about the town's past. Amelia explained her theory about the code and the strange symbol. Mrs. Selby's eyes widened as she listened. "The symbol you describe," she said slowly, "it's not new. It's from an old legend, one that's been passed down for generations in Thornfield. It's the mark of the vengeful spirit. A curse, if you believe such things." "A curse?" Amelia raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "The legend says that the town was founded by a group of settlers who, many years ago, were wronged by a man named Elias Blackwood. His descendants are said to have kept the curse alive, and every generation has been marked by vengeance until the family is completely eradicated." Amelia stood frozen, absorbing the librarian's words. Blackwood. The name echoed in her mind like a drumbeat. Was Gregory Blackwood somehow involved in this ancient curse? And did his family hold the key to Margaret's death? Determined to get to the bottom of this mystery, Amelia paid another visit to the Blackwood mansion. This time, she was not just looking for answers but for proof. Gregory greeted her once again, though his demeanor had shifted. There was something cold in his eyes, as if he were expecting her arrival. "I assume you've been talking to the townsfolk, detective," he said, his voice tinged with a hint of mockery. "Mrs. Selby, no doubt, has told you her little stories. But I assure you, none of it is true." Amelia didn't flinch. "I'm not here for stories, Mr. Blackwood. I'm here for the truth." Blackwood's smile was thin and tight. "The truth? You'll find that the truth is a much darker thing than you can handle." Amelia's patience was wearing thin. "What are you hiding, Mr. Blackwood? Why are you so desperate to avoid answering questions about your family's past?" Gregory's expression faltered for just a second, before he regained his composure. "You think you understand, but you have no idea what you're dealing with. Leave this place, detective. Leave now, before it's too late." But Amelia wasn't about to back down. "I'm not leaving until I have answers." As she stepped forward, she noticed a small, ornate box on the desk. It was old, covered in dust, but it seemed out of place in the otherwise tidy room. Her eyes narrowed. "What's this?" she asked, pointing to the box. Gregory's eyes followed her gaze, and for the first time, a flicker of fear crossed his face. "That's nothing. Just an old family heirloom." Amelia reached out and opened the box, revealing a series of small, black stones, each etched with a symbol she recognized, the same symbol that had been found on Margaret Whitmore's hand. The realization hit Amelia like a lightning bolt. The stones, the symbol, the curse, it all made sense now. The Blackwood family was not just connected to the town's dark past, they were its architects. And Gregory Blackwood was not just a writer, he was the keeper of the family's twisted legacy. Before Amelia could speak, Gregory lunged at her, knocking the box from her hands. "You don't understand. You have no idea what you're doing." His voice was frantic now, full of panic. Amelia stood her ground, her expression calm. "I understand perfectly. You and your family have been carrying out this curse for generations. But what I don't understand is why Margaret had to die." Gregory paused, his face a mask of anguish. "She knew too much," he whispered. "She found out about the family's dealings. She was going to expose us. But we couldn't let that happen." Amelia felt a cold shiver run down her spine. "So, you killed her?" Gregory's face twisted in torment. "I didn't want to, but I had no choice. The curse. It compels us to act when the family's secret is in danger. It's not just vengeance we seek, it's survival." Amelia stepped closer, her voice steady. "There's no curse, Gregory. There's only your obsession with power and control. And I'm going to make sure you answer for what you've done." Just as Amelia moved to arrest him, a loud crash echoed through the mansion. A figure emerged from the shadows, an older man, his face twisted in rage. "You think you can destroy our legacy, detective?" he spat. It was Gregory's father, Elias Blackwood, the patriarch of the family. "Father," Gregory said weakly, his voice full of fear. "She knows everything. She's going to ruin us." Elias sneered. "Let her. We've been untouchable for centuries. And we always will be." But Amelia wasn't intimidated. With a swift motion, she drew her weapon, aiming it at Elias. "This ends now." Just as she was about to apprehend them both, the mansion seemed to shake. The walls groaned as if in protest. Amelia's heart raced. It wasn't just the family she was facing, it was the very house itself, as if the curse was fighting back. In the chaos that followed, Amelia managed to subdue both Gregory and Elias Blackwood. But as the dust settled, the mansion itself seemed to collapse in on itself, the once sturdy walls crumbling into nothingness. The Blackwoods had paid the price for their twisted legacy, and Thornfield would never be the same. Amelia walked away from the ruins of the mansion, her mind racing. The case had been solved, but the darkness that lingered would haunt her for a long time to come. As she left the town behind, she couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper, something darker, still lingered in the shadows.